Hello YouTube, I hope you're having a great day today. Today I want to take a look at Michael Moorcock's first book in the Hawkmoon series, The Jewel in the Skull. I talked about this recently in one of my special things I did coming near my 50th anniversary, and I looked at what I consider to be my own personal Appendix N, and these are works that I consider to be particularly influential from fantasy genre that I still kind of carry with me today and so forth. And one of those was actually my top one, was the Eternal Champion series by Michael Moorcock. Michael Moorcock is a famous writer from the UK who's written and is still writing and has written for decades and decades. His first stuff was published in the 50s. And one of the things, Michael Moorcock is considered by many people in the UK to be more of a literary writer. And he has kind of transcended the genre there. He's one of the first people to write cyberpunk stuff and put cyberpunk on the map in a major way in the late 60s. He also has a number of works that have been while still science fiction or fantasy works, have had a sort of a tone to them that kind of has greater purpose to them. An example of that's Behold the Man, where somebody will go back, where there's this big fan of Jesus, who's this German guy who's everybody keeps telling him that Jesus didn't actually live, so when he comes across a time machine, he goes back in time, finds out that Jesus didn't live, and so he actually takes Jesus' place. And that story is called Behold the Man. And that becomes a famous novel too, that was very, very award-winning. And that's sort of an idea of bringing conversations and such forth is something that Michael Moorcock was very well known for. He also championed the new wave in science fiction as he led a sort of magazine at the time in Britain that was publishing a lot of this sort of newer avant-garde stuff in science fiction. It kind of broke the mold and so forth. And so he kind of led multiple revolutions in science fiction, in fantasy, and so forth. His stuff was considered very heavy. And a lot of his things like Byzantium and Durs and other works are considered very, very sort of transcending of the genre. I've also already reviewed for you a story that's set in the Eternal Champion sort of mythos, but back in past Earth, after the 100 Years' War, where called The Warhound and the World's Pain, where our main characters are being asked by Satan to retrieve the World Cup, the Grail, the World Cup too, sure, why not? The Holy Grail. So they're on a Grail quest for Lucifer in order to restore the world's pain and also to restore Lucifer into the good graces of God and so forth, so he can return to heaven. So it's a redemption quest for Lucifer as well as a Grail quest. And it reads very much like a modern take of an Inferno and so forth. And that's, I think, a good example of how Moorcock can sometimes rise above the genres that he writes for. Moorcock isn't always the best writer. He would admit this himself. He would call himself a good, not a great writer, but with great ideas. And he says, I'd much rather be a great ideist and not the best writer than vice versa. Than to be somebody who's a great writer who has horrible ideas or just writing trash and so forth. But Moorcock is very avant-garde. And he has a lot of different ways of doing it. One of the core concepts of Michael Moorcock that you're going to see here with Hawkmoon and some of the other things too that we're going to be taking a look at is that you have this eternal champion. And basically what he does is his world is set in a multiverse of various planes. And he is, by the way, the first person to coin the phrase multiverse. So if you hear that being used later on, he's the guy who started that. And his works are basically a number of fantasy and science fiction works that are set on all these different planes. And they have one central avatar who fights against the gods of chaos and law on these various planes, and that person is the Eternal Champion. And so the Eternal Champion will come to various planes, fight on behalf of various people in order to sort of push back against evil or chaos and so forth, or vice versa. Sometimes they'll fight for chaos and so forth too, when laws got a little out of hand, or to bring a little chaos to the party and so forth. But typically he's going to fight against chaos and against evil stuff and so forth. And Hawkmoon, in the 4-book series you're going to be reading now, I would consider, he's also wrote many different people. It's probably his most famous one is Elric, but we're not going to start with the Elric series. There's tons of books in the Elric series and so forth. We're going to start the Hawkmoon series, and we're going to start the Hawkmoon series for a few reasons. One, because I think it's probably the easiest to get into. Michael Moorcock can sometimes have a little bit of a heady writing style. He's very quick. For example, this big giant book has all 4 of his tomes that he wrote, and each of them are like 100 and some pages. If you were to get them in novel form, you could read them in like, which I have on my shelf if you were interested in. They're small little novels, are probably this thick, and so forth. In their original publication, maybe 150, 160 pages each. There's a 4 set, so it's basically a quartet of novels, and he's going to do a huge number of things in these 4 novels that are really short. And he had mastered the style by this time of writing a lot of stuff in one novel. So you're not getting a one novel that just introduces the world or something like that, but you have a lot of things that are going to happen in it too. The book that we're going to be looking at today, Jewel in the Skull, is published in '67 and will be the first of these books. And so again, I think not only is it something that I consider to be the easiest probably of the Eternal Champion stories to kind of pick up and start. It's also the one that's in Gary Gygax's Appendix N. If you look at Appendix N, he's going to list all of Michael Moorcock's works, but he's going to give special attention to this series, the Hawkmoon 4-book series. And I agree, I think it's really good. And I consider it probably the second best of my series from the Eternal Champion series. Overall, I'd still consider the Elric series to be better, but I would consider it this to be a strong thing too. So that's why we're going to start with it. Now, the Hawkmoon series, it's basically in a post-apocalyptic Europe and world and so forth. And technology and science has advanced alongside of magic and so forth that have sort of come to be. Now, this is a common setting during the era. There are a lot of people that we've actually already reviewed for you, like Fred Saberhagen's Empire of the East, or, somebody from the 70s, like Sterling Lanier's stuff to his works with Hero's Journey and such. So there's a number of people who are going to write in this sort of post-apocalyptic fantasies rather than post-apocalyptic science fictions. But I would consider Hawkmoon to probably be the best example of that. So I'll save the best for last. We're still going to finish up some of the other things too. I've got the 3rd book in Empire of the East that I haven't reviewed for you yet by Fred Saberhagen and stuff. But this is, I think, a very strong example of a post-apocalyptic fantasy rather than a post-apocalyptic science fiction that has a post-apocalyptic event that's occurred and now we're living in it, but there's like magic and dark things have come and so forth. So there's that kind of a feel to it. So anyway, that's kind of the world that we're set in now. The major big bads, he wanted to have a reverse. Again, he's somebody who likes to write against the current trends or people and so forth. So he does that quite often in his stories. So in this story, he intentionally has the big bad guys as Great Britain. Their name has become corrupted to Granbreton. To show the Granbretons are the worst. They're evil, they're nasty, they're creating this nasty empire, and so forth. Meanwhile, he has the good guys are from Germany and France, specifically from the Kamarg, and so forth. So what you're going to be doing, you're going to be introduced into 2 major sets of players in this book, in the first book. So what you're going to be having in the first chapter is not going to have anything that has to do with Hawkmoon at all. Even though it's Hawkmoon's book and Hawkmoon's series, and he's the Eternal Champion, you're not going to have to worry about that because this is not Hawkmoon's the first part. In fact, it's going to be set in the jurisdiction of Count Brass. You're going to get a chance to meet him, the Kamarg, many of his advisors like Gentle, his daughter Ysilda, and so forth. And the thing is that they all know the evil of Granbreton, but Granbreton has gotten so powerful now, and Granbreton has offered them basically an olive branch to come and join the group, and so forth, without war, without being conquered, and so forth. They can just come kind of join the Empire, an alliance, and so forth. Baron Melidius wants to marry his daughter, Ysilda, and so forth. So there's that sort of consideration. Although she doesn't love him or want to get married with him, she doesn't think her dad's going to marry her off. Anyway, but there's that kind of an idea of having her marry off for an alliance. Gentle is like, these people are bad and evil, and you know it too, Count Brass, and so forth. So we should resist Granbreton rather than join them and so forth. That's evil, right? You know it too, and so forth. So yes, we would survive, but in our count, and the Kamarg would survive, but that's not a good thing. Gentle is probably the voice of the point of view characters at that point in time, even though he's not actually the point of view character, but he's probably the voice of the author and you as a reader, and so forth. So anyway, that's kind of the first part. There's an attempt to kidnap Ysilda in the first part, yada yada yada. In the second part, you're going to be introduced to your main character, Dorian Hawkmoon, and so you're going to be introduced to him as the ruler of Koln over in Germany, and Cologne basically, and in that area and region. He's basically the Duke there. He's been actively pushing back against Granbreton, and Granbreton's evil and so forth, and you're going to join him right about when he loses. The plot's going to move over to him losing. He's going to get taken over to Londra, which is, Londra, of course, is London. It's the modern version of London. So he gets taken over to Londra, which is the capital of this evil empire, and he's going to get sent over there, and they're going to force him to go and spy on the Kamarg, and he's going to have a jewel put in his skull, and basically they're going to be able to see through him and control him with that jewel that's in his skull. That's basically going to be embedded in his skull. He's going to arrive in the Kamarg as a spy for Granbreton, who's going to be helping the bad guys like Meledius and so forth, and then basically what's going to end up happening, and this is about halfway through the book. I'm going to stop you there with my just basically overall plot, but obviously they're going to fix the jewel in the skull, and then he's going to have to go on a quest. And so the third part's going to be the quest for him to go fix his jewel permanently and so forth, and then join. And then have them join actively the resistance against Granbreton. That'll move into the second, third, and fourth books, which you can read about and follow. And he's going to be told a number of things that are going to happen near the end of the book and so forth. Again, I'm going to stop that because I don't want to give you too many spoilers. It's not a long read. It'll probably take you 2 hours to read the first book. The first time, it's not that hard. Again, it's 120, 130 pages long. It might take you 2.5 or 3 hours if you wanted to slow down, enjoy Moorcock's style of writing or something like that, or take a break to read a coffee or something like that. But you can sit down and read it in 2.5 hours tops. That's probably how long it took for me to read it the first time. It didn't even take me longer than a day to read this book the first time, and so forth. And if you could easily just set aside, a couple hours a day and knock out all 4 of these books and so forth. So what I'll do actually in the comments, we'll actually link you to a couple of options for you to read. I'll link you to one of these sort of collections, so you can pick it up just in one and just kind of read them all. I'm actually going to knock out all 4 of these books, but I'll probably wait a few weeks in between them to give you a chance to kind of get a chance to read them, get a feel for them, and so forth. But I've also done this with the Chronicles of Amber that I'm currently finishing up for you guys, as well as the Empire of the East and some other things too, where I'm knocking out 4, a trilogy or a 5-book series in the Chronicles of Amber and such. So we'll be doing the same thing here. I'm going to be doing 4 books for you at a time, separate them out by a few weeks each, so that way you get a chance to read them. But again, just like Amber or the Empire of the East, they're not going to take you a long time to read, because this was at a time when your writers got you into a story and got you out. You're going to have more things happen in this one tiny little book that's this big than you would have had in a 500-page Robert Jordan novel, where nothing happens at all. You might have a 600-page Robert Jordan novel, and by the time that it ends in the series, only one thing has happened, and plot-wise, one Forsaken has died. Whoop-de-doo. Nothing will happen in a 600-page Robert Jordan novel, but you'll have like a ton of plot and things. Character advancement's going to happen in a 150-page novel by Moorcock or Zalaz, and a lot of these sort of great masters of having a short story. Jack Vance is another example of that too. So anyway, so feel free to take a look at it. If you've read it, I'd love to talk with you about it more. If there's anything you want to talk about, spoilers and so forth, feel free to let me know what you think about it. Do you agree with me? I think that it's the second best of the stories, sort of, or is the setting something that intrigues you, or do you think it's a little? I think the setting's very, very interesting and unique. And again, I also enjoy Moorcock's play. He was writing during the time of Britain being the good guys and Germany being the bad guys, right after World War II. So he plays against that trope, and I enjoy that from Moorcock and so forth. Is that something that you enjoy too? Happy to engage you with that further and such. So anyway, this is the first of the 4 books of the series, and it sets up both the Kamarg and the characters from the Kamarg, like Iselda, Count Brass, Beau Gentle, and so forth, as well as your main character of Hawkmoon and his main travel buddy, Oladon. So you'll be introduced to him in part 3 too. He'll pick him up to his main companion too. And so forth. So there you are. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Happy to engage you with it further, and so forth. And hey, look, if you like this video, there's no reason not to hit the subscribe button. I really do love a lot of these sort of older classics in fantasy, science fiction, and horror. So my channel's sort of dedicated to unpacking a lot of these classics. And finally, hey, I want to thank you so much for your time, because if you've watched this video all the way to the end, then you've invested some time in me today. And with all the busy things that we have in our lives and all the busy things that are taking time, the fact that you spent this time with me is something I really appreciate. So thanks again. You have a good one.